Welcome to the Seamland podcast. My name is Seam Lund, and today we have a live Q&A with Dr. James Di Antonio. In this episode, we talk about minerals, electrolytes, and our new book, The Mineral Fix. You can get The Mineral Fix from Amazon. All right, James, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Seam.
Yeah, it's glad to talk with you again, and yeah, we definitely should do like a follow-up stream or a Q&A about the minerals. Like people have been reading the book, and we got a lot of positive feedback from that. But there's also like a lot still like some questions left in the air, so we can just address them in this short little live stream today.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sounds good. And I did take some questions from my Instagram as well, from people. And yeah, we'll start with those. And afterwards, you can just start asking your questions in the chat. So the first question is going to be, animal foods. What would be some animal foods high in magnesium? And you can't eat salmon. So what would be like some alternatives to that?
Okay, well, yeah, that's funny. That's mostly animal foods that are high in magnesium are typically fish. The problem is that overfishing is really a tremendous damage to Earth. So essentially, when you kill the fish, you're taking away the phytoplankton, which actually gives us 85% of our oxygen on Earth. Most people kind of look at it as rainforests, but it's really the health of our oceans. And so I'm starting to eat a lot less fish. I mean, if you're going to eat a fish, salmon probably is better than like eating tuna or, because the bycatch, when you go and eat fish and you're killing all the sharks and turtles and all that stuff, it's just so damaging. So, it's hard to get magnesium on an animal-based diet, which is why I supplement the diet with mineral waters, because I don't think you can get an optimal amount eating just purely animal foods. I'm trying to think of, besides fish, what other animal foods have magnesium? What comes to mind for you, C?
Yeah, like liver has like a little bit. So I think 3 ounces of liver has like 40 to 50 milligrams of magnesium, which is, not a lot compared to like salmon that has a lot more. And like say pumpkin seeds, which are like 150 around there. So yeah, like you would be better off by maybe like drinking some magnesium rich water. Also like, beef and chicken also have, but it's even less than liver. So yeah, like ideally you would want to like either take like a supplement or drink a lot of like these mineral waters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, like magnesium itself is again like one of the biggest kind of deficiencies, or like it's also very hard to get. Like even the plant foods are relatively like low in magnesium.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really like the taste of plant food. So I've kind of forced myself to try to also include things like spinach for the magnesium and the potassium and also the nitrates, right, to boost nitric oxide. Because animal foods are fairly low in magnesium, it's probably slightly more bioavailable. So what's interesting is kale, the bioavailability of magnesium from kale is about 35-36%, which is pretty good. Spinach goes down a little bit because of the oxalates. It's about 25-26% bioavailable, but spinach has a much higher amount of magnesium compared to kale. So from a serving basis, spinach is actually a pretty good source of magnesium.
Gotcha. So is the oxalates the biggest like these phytonutrients that reduce the magnesium absorption, or are there like other ones as well? Like does fiber in general have that effect?
Right. Yep. Exactly. Fiber will reduce the absorption of magnesium. Phytates will also reduce the absorption of magnesium a little bit. They primarily reduce the absorption of iron, which in some cases is good. We actually think that some of the potential benefits of like unrefined whole grains are actually due to the phytic acid and the phytates, which on their own singular compounds have been shown to have anti-cancer effects. So there's this balance. Like if you're eating an overall bioavailable nutrient diet and you add in phytic acid, which can bind free iron in the body, maybe that's potentially beneficial, which is why I do consume a little bit of unrefined whole grains. I consume probably 2 slices of Ezekiel bread per day for the manganese, also the magnesium. Ezekiel bread's pretty high in magnesium too. So
Yeah, like that is maybe a bit of a misunderstanding about these phytates and phytonutrients, is that they're not necessarily bad. Like they actually may have like a good effect. And yeah, for example, in the example of chelating iron or something else, then that can be better for you, because you don't want to have like, yeah, too much iron or too much zinc, for example. You want to have them like in the kind of the optimal amounts and in balance with the other minerals.
Right. So we tend to take these stories of people who primarily are consuming grains and they have
Right.
all these nutrient deficits, and we sort of transfer and say, okay, we demonize those food groups then. And really, if you actually integrate a small amount of them onto, let's say, an animal-based diet where you have a ton of nutrients that are super bioavailable, it could actually lead to more benefits than harms.
Yeah, and it's usually only the super refined white flours and those things that deplete the magnesium completely. So you're not going to get any magnesium from basically the white bread or the sunflower oil and these other refined oils as well. The refining is destroying most of the magnesium.
Right. 100%. The refinement of flour you'll lose at least 80% of the magnesium. And when you refine sugar, you lose 99 to 100% of the magnesium. And also, it's very difficult to get manganese on an animal-based diet unless you're consuming mussels on a
Mm.
fairly consistent basis. And I really don't like the taste of mussels. So I typically tend to just go for Ezekiel bread. 2 to 3 slices of Ezekiel bread will actually give you the RDA for manganese, but also
Right.
boosts your magnesium, selenium, and a couple other nutrients as well. So just a couple little additions of these plant foods can really boost certain minerals that are low in animal foods, because animal foods don't cover everything.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, the best example is boron, which you get exclusively from plants, which is like the cell wall of the plant. And yeah, boron, you don't, unless you're maybe eating like the intestines or something, then you're definitely not going to get any boron from like animal foods.
yeah, that's the thing. So we don't really eat truly nose to tail. Most
Mm.
people are eating the bone marrow. They're not, consuming the interstitial fluids in the blood that contain nutrients. And I mean, I did look at a little bit of how we would have gotten different nutrients, and bone marrow does contain good amounts of chromium. It actually can be very high in chromium.
Okay.
And so, I'm not scraping bone marrow every day to get chromium. So, finding different ways to get these minerals and nutrients is important. And like you said, manganese is high in things like avocados and plums and dates and or boron, excuse me.
Hmm.
Boron is really in the plant foods, right? Avocados, dates, plums, things like that. So boron's a tough one for me. I don't really eat a lot of foods high in boron, so I typically supplement with a trace mineral 3 times a week that has boron in it, and it also has manganese and chromium and molybdenum and some of these other ones, just to cover my basis, because my diet's not always perfect.
Yeah, yeah. But what about the sourdough bread with ancient greens? Like that's
Mhm.
probably like one of the healthier alternatives to like actual bread.
Yeah, traditional sourdough bread will have typically it'll have less gluten. And, there's a huge debate on whether gluten is bad or not. And I think if you have a damaged gut, gluten becomes harmful. Or if you consume refined grains that contain isolated gluten without the vitamin E and all these other nutrients that can actually protect harms from gluten, then it becomes harmful, because traditional societies have consumed bread for a long time, and they didn't seem to have any issues. And all of a sudden, when you have this dwarf wheat and you're starting to use glyphosate, and things in the 1950s started taking a turn on its head, and now all of a sudden we have people that are gluten intolerant or celiac disease, and that we didn't have that previous to, let's say, 1950. So it can't be the gluten that's naturally contained that's the primary driver. If it only started occurring in the mid 1900s and then increased from there, something had to have changed in our diet and the environment that caused gluten to be a problem.
Hmm. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And yeah, like even hunter gatherers, they would eat these wild grains on a regular basis. And there was the seasons where the game wasn't like accessible all the time, especially in like the Middle Eastern regions where we kind of originated from, the Levant and that's sort of the Fertile Crescent. There you didn't have like mammoths all the time. You had like this small game, and they would die off during such certain parts of the season. So they would regularly or they would resort back to these grains every once in a while. And after the agricultural revolution, then they would start to kind of keep them into their diet on a more regular basis. So yeah, that's definitely true. Like the quality of the wheat and the quality of the grains is definitely much more important.
Yep, for sure.
Good. Yeah, like next question would be like, why do people get deficient in molybdenum, and how to reverse it?
Yeah, no, molybdenum is taxed when you consume nitrates. And that's in things like wines, and they also add those to as preservatives sometimes in meat and stuff like that. These nitrates, molybdenum helps us handle those types of things. And molybdenum is another, unless you're consuming liver, it's difficult to get, which is why they put it in a lot of those trace mineral supplements.
Yeah, I think the liver is the best source of molybdenum for sure. So that will be the kind of most reliable way of preventing the becoming deficient of it as well.
Yep.
Next question is it okay to drink water purified by reverse osmosis?
I think it's fine. I think it's missing the larger picture, though, in the fact that you're going to consume 2 to 3 liters of water per day. Might as well make the best of it, and might as well utilize this non-caloric source for boosting your overall mineral intake. So a lot of people focus on purifying dead water, essentially. And that shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be, how do I use this liquid to get in nutrients that are missing from my diet? And it comes back to finding waters that are high in calcium and magnesium, which is typically low on an animal-based diet. I do think most people will benefit from an animal-based diet. So if that's the, let's say, optimal diet, then we should be utilizing water to get the 2 nutrients that tend to be missing in animal foods, which is calcium and magnesium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the mineral waters are like 0-calorie minerals, and the waters themselves can be good for like blood sugar regulation, and the research finds that it helps with like chronic pain and osteoarthritis and all the similar issues that result from mineral deficiencies. So yeah, like the best thing about it is that you absorb more of it from the water than you do from actual food. So I think the mineral waters are actually even better than animal foods in terms of the absorption of the minerals that you get from there.
Right. And your typical animal-based diet is going to produce about 150 milliequivalents of acid. If you're strictly carnivorous, that'll probably bump up to about 200. And then if you start adding eggs to 2.5 pounds of meat a day, you're going to get up to 250 milliequivalents of acid. The goal is to not excrete any acid. That's the goal, because when your kidneys excrete acid, you're producing ammonia, which is damaging to the kidneys, and you have to excrete minerals like magnesium, calcium, potassium. So the mineral water is another great way to get bicarbonate. So if you can also grab mineral waters that contain bicarbonate, you're getting a dual benefit of getting those minerals and also inhibiting the acid from your animal-based diet.
Right. Yeah. The bicarbonate. Like what would be like you do get from fruits and vegetables bicarbonate, but I think the waters tend to be the highest source of bicarbonate. If you have like something like Gerolsteiner that is pretty high in bicarbonate.
Yeah. Yep. So getting it through waters, you're actually ingesting bicarbonate directly. Whereas fruits and vegetables, you're getting it from precursors like citrate, which is in fruits, malate, which is in vegetables. You can also get it from gluconate as well. So there's these precursors that you consume in vegetables and fruits that'll get converted to bicarbonate, or you can just straight take up bicarbonate through mineral waters that naturally contain it. And typically, so 2 liters of Gerolsteiner water will inhibit about 50 milliequivalents of acid. So if you're on an animal-based diet, you're producing 150. The goal is to produce none. 2 liters of Gerolsteiner only knocks it down to 100 milliequivalents of acid. That's still a tremendous acid load. Right. So that's why I try to integrate things like lightly cooked potatoes, which are very alkaline, spinach, green bananas. I try to integrate that. And that's also boosting your potassium intake as well. So that allows me to handle more salt too.
Hmm.
So trying to integrate just a few, just, 1 or 2 green bananas is great for inhibiting the acid from your animal-based diet, but also boosting your potassium, B6, and a couple other minerals too.
Yeah, yeah, and even like you can get quite a lot of potassium from like potatoes, even like up to 500 to 1,000 milligrams per from like a single potato, and it's pretty much easier to cover that potassium intake with something like that compared to, you do get some potassium from like animal foods as well, but it's relatively small compared to the fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. One medium potato typically is going to give you a full gram of potassium. And this is what's interesting, right? Is that it's not just about how much potassium you consume. It's also about what type of environment you're creating in your body. So for example, an animal-based diet, if you're really producing 150 to 200 milliequivalents of acid, that will cause you can actually lose potassium from the body, because what ends up happening is during the first couple of weeks of acidosis, this is just low grade, potassium will leave the cell and you will lose it. And the balance studies show that acidosis produced either through the diet or through consuming ammonium chloride will cause a negative potassium balance. And so if you're creating an acidic state in the body, it's not just like, okay, well, meat has a lot of potassium. Well, that's great. But if it's forcing the potassium out of the cell, then you're becoming intracellularly depleted in it. So
Hmm.
there's both does this diet produce a certain state in the body that's causing me to lose minerals? And then also, okay, is this bioavailable, this diet bioavailable in the nutrient?
Right. Yeah. Would like how does like salt affect that the potassium balance, because they do work together? So like would like a higher salt intake, like I don't know, make you preserve more of the potassium or something?
It's there's this interesting balance between salt and potassium. The primary thing we need to understand is that if you're just a little bit deficient in potassium, you start over retaining sodium. And so really get potassium good, and then you can handle salt very well. As soon as you dip just a little bit below an adequate intake of potassium, or an adequate state of potassium in the body, sodium starts to become a problem. And potassium is controlled primarily by 2 things, primarily by salt and magnesium. So magnesium controls potassium in the cell. If you're deficient in magnesium, that can lead to potassium deficiency. And then salt controls magnesium, which ultimately controls potassium as well, because when you're deficient in salt, you start pulling magnesium from the bone, and that can lead to both magnesium and potassium deficiency. And calcium you start pulling from the bone as well. So it's this balance. It's like, you need to get good amounts of salt, but if you're not getting good amounts of potassium, then you're not able to handle salt well. And that's kind of like what we cover in our book, right? SEAM is like, if you don't get enough magnesium, you become calcium overloaded. If you
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
get enough, right, copper, you become iron overloaded. So like, it's a really interesting story about the whole mineral balance too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the that is how the most of the minerals tend to work. Yeah, and some too much of something can be like problematic in absorbing the other mineral, or yeah, like the other one makes excrete the other one, etc. So it can be like a lot of times can be like overwhelming for a lot of people to know like, okay, what do I actually need to do? But like let's say in a whole foods context, a lot of the times just eating these whole foods that have these minerals kind of maintains this delicate balance, at least within optimal range. And it only goes out of balance if you are, let's say, suffering from some sort of chronic disease, or you're having like a supplement that is pushing the kind of intake of one mineral out of the range and something like that. So like these unnatural situations where the problems tend to come from. And a lot of the time you just need to, if you're healthy and you are at a reasonable intake of whole foods, then you can just yeah, stick to these foods that have like a particular mineral and stay in the optimal range.
Right. And people can sort of pick and choose how they want to do this. We laid out in the book, the highest food sources of all these minerals. So it's sort of like, however you want to skin the cat, is how you can do this. But through foods is always best if you can, because taking high doses of supplements just once or twice can overload the system. It's always better to consume lower doses of minerals more frequently. You just get better bioavailability, less side effects.
Yeah. On that note, like, would you ever recommend taking like a potassium supplement?
So I will sometimes include potassium citrate if I don't consume enough plant foods and I want to boost my potassium intake as well as my formation of bicarbonate. I'll maybe consume 3 grams of potassium citrate at most twice a day. And I'll also add sodium citrate as well if I don't get enough plant foods for the day to
Mm,
offset the acid.
right. Yeah. Yeah, like ideally you would get the potassium from whole foods, but yeah, like it's quite difficult for people, who are used to maybe eating like processed foods or something, and they don't get access to like too many fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
But how much? One question was also that how much potassium could you handle in like one sitting?
Yep. The most I'll ever do is 1 gram of potassium, which comes from 3 grams of potassium citrate. When you start going above consuming 1 gram of potassium in a single sitting, that's where you can get into problems. And
Hmm.
it depends on kidney function too. If you have poor kidney function, then you got to be really careful with how much potassium you ingest especially from a supplement.
Yeah. But like from whole foods, if you're eating like a ton of like bananas or something, or a ton of potatoes, what would be like the upper threshold for potassium?
I mean, the studies show that if you're a healthy person, even eating up to 20 grams of potassium through the diet doesn't seem to be an issue.
Yeah, yeah. Like even the hunter gatherers, they at least the studies show that they eat around like 10 grams or something, and yeah, like it will be like have to be consuming like several times above the RDA to have like some sort of a negative effect, I think, and it's kind of relatively safe for most people.
Right.
All right. About the reverse osmosis, or is it like how would you like remineralize the water after it's gone through the reverse osmosis?
Some people will add mineral drops. There's different companies that have these trace minerals in a liquid form, and they'll tell you you can add like 2 drops to 8 ounces of water. Some people do that. Um, I like to just consume Gerolsteiner water because it naturally contains bicarbonate. There are other waters though too that have good amounts of magnesium, calcium, bicarbonate. So we have a whole list in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's not like nothing wrong about drinking just this purified water, as long as you're, still compensating for it afterwards by either like eating more of certain minerals or like adding salt into your other waters or something. So you don't have to drink like this salty water if you don't like it. You can
Right.
still stay healthy and still get your vitamins and minerals. But it's just that if you're only drinking this purified water, then you may run into some issues because of like excreting those minerals. And if you don't have like a good diet as well, then you're eventually going to lead you're going to find yourself in like this negative loss of these certain minerals.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. What would be some of the most likely needed minerals that you need to kind of supplement to achieve an optimal intake that it's very hard to get from food?
Most people will probably are lacking in boron, manganese, magnesium, calcium, depending on their diet, potassium as well, and copper too is difficult unless you're consuming liver. So you can do okay. How I typically build the diet, if you build your diet this way, you're going to be able to cover most of your minerals. You start with 12 ounces of pastured red meat. That covers your B12, zinc, iron, and protein for most people. And then you start adding organs to that. Liver, especially 1/2 ounce of liver per day, you're going to cover folate, vitamin A, and copper. And then either mussels for manganese or unrefined whole grains for manganese or a supplement. And then the waters, magnesium and calcium will be supplemented through the water. And then certain plant foods like either bananas, potatoes, spinach will help you with the potassium and also help you inhibit the acid load of the animal-based diet.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah.
going to get you pretty close to almost everything. I mean, you're still going to be lacking boron unless you're consuming avocados and dates and raisins. But a lot of people don't want to consume the sugar from the dates and the raisins, which is why I do take a trace mineral supplement typically 3 times a week, maybe twice a week, because it has the boron.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good kind of basis. I do agree. And like for boron, you could also eat like a few of these beans and legumes or these dried prunes that tend to be like lower in sugar than dates. So that
Mhm.
would be a good source for that. And like one thing that I would add into the list is chromium. So chromium we get primarily from mussels and oysters and seafood, as well as like broccoli or oatmeal a little bit. But yeah, like most people rarely eat mussels, and like you said, and you don't really like the taste either. So you know, that for chromium, it's good to maybe like take a supplement if you have like this insulin resistance or diabetes, because you already at a higher demand for chromium, and taking a supplement can help with that. So
Yeah.
like whenever, like what I do is like whenever I have like a high carb meal or something, then I may take like a chromium supplement as well, to kind of help with the kind of insulin production and the blood sugar regulation.
Yeah, I do take a chromium supplement probably 3 times a week as well, especially because I go into the sauna, and you lose about 7.5 micrograms of chromium through the body, which, since chromium's bioavailability through the diet or supplement is so low at 1%, if you lose 7 micrograms, you have to ingest 700 to replace the loss. And so typically I do consume 600 micrograms of chromium after a sauna session, or after an intense exercise session where I was sweating pretty rigorously. And like you said too, if you eat a carb meal, you are going to need more chromium. So that is a great time as well to take some additional chromium.
Yeah. And magnesium is maybe something as a supplement like most people probably need. Even if they're not like deficient in it, they can still use it to maybe like sleep better or relax or something, because yeah, like the threshold for magnesium is also quite high before it becomes like harmful.
Yeah, I mean, we used to consume in the early 1900s 500 milligrams of magnesium per day. That dropped to 250 by the late 70s and 80s, just because the food is now more depleted and so much more processed. So yeah, most people do need an extra 200 to 300 milligrams of magnesium to get back to where we used to consume it.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a question. Like fresh versus dried herbs, can they be used like as a mineral supplementation to get something?
Herbs typically are not super high in minerals. I know we've talked about shilajit, which is a little bit different than an herb. It's like this plant matter, like from also mixing with like volcanic substances, and
Yeah.
it can be fairly high in minerals as well. Some people use that as a
Hmm.
additional mineral intake.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the herbs like rosemary and things, they don't have like a bunch of minerals, maybe like some vitamins,
Right.
but mostly you get like this very high concentration of these polyphenols and these other phytonutrients in there, and that can be useful for some cases. But even then, you would have to like consume a whole lot of it, like maybe several tablespoons or something, to get like a sufficient amount of an effect in terms of the nutritional response. So yeah, like what I would just use it was to kind of season your food with, and like rosemary is great for cooking because it protects against the oxidation and reduces the carcinogens. And so yeah, I would much rather try to use them only as like these seasoning and condiments rather than actually use it as something to eat or a supplement with.
Right. And there's this, what's not talked about a lot too, is the difference between fresh produce and fresh meat compared to, the typical meat that you consume that's been sitting in the supermarket for, well, it's hung for at least 2 weeks. And then, by the time you eat it, it's maybe been 3 weeks since the animal's actually killed.
Hmm.
Typically, living naturally, you would have always consumed some fresh meat, which would have been much higher in vitamin C. You would have hunted the animal and stressed the animal to produce more vitamin C.
Hmm.
And you do lose some nutrients when you're not consuming fresh. So if you can consume as fresh as possible, that does make a little bit of a difference too.
Hmm. Yeah, that's super interesting that you mentioned that the you get vitamin C if you hunt the animal, basically because the animal starts to produce the vitamin C. So that makes also sense that even ancestrally the hunter gatherers would get like a higher amounts of vitamin C from the kind of fresh kill, and the fresh animal would also have like the blood still in there, so they would get some additional minerals from the blood as well. So yeah, that is that is a pretty interesting kind of idea.
Yeah, there's never been like a that I know of a test comparing if you've hunt an animal, persistent hunt an animal for like let's say an hour or two and
Mhm.
stress it out, which there are studies showing that if you exercise an animal, they produce about 3 times more vitamin C, and if an animal is stressed or sick, they can produce up to 10 times more vitamin C. There's never been like a direct comparison of like how much vitamin C is like in the liver or in organs or in the blood in an animal that has been stressed and hunted versus like meat that's been hung for 2 weeks and then set to the shelf for
Right.
another week.
Mm. Yeah, but do you lose like a substantial amount if you have like a dried or this aged kind of a meat? Even if it's like, let's say, even if it's like frozen, you freeze the meat for like a few months or something, half a year at maximum. Like how much of a difference would it be versus a fresh kill?
So I think we have some studies on vitamins, but and definitely there's a good amount of like loss for vitamins, especially in plants. If they just like, let's say you buy potatoes and you just let them sit for like weeks and weeks, there's definitely a reduction in vitamins. Whether there's a reduction in minerals at that point, I'm not sure. But vitamin C is more of something that, yes, that does happen. You do start losing it the less fresh that it is.
Mm.
So, I mean, I have to believe that if we had consumed fresh meat, it would have been much higher in vitamin C compared to, supermarket
Right.
meat.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think so as well. And the same applies to like potassium, probably. Like you lose potassium if it sits around for too long, and if you dry it up, then also you kind of tend to lose it.
Right. And the other thing too is when animals die, right? The You start breaking down and releasing the free iron, and the free iron starts oxidizing the proteins and the fats in the meat. And then when you freeze meat, you do start oxidizing it as well. So it is important to sort of offset the oxidation. So I do try to consume some type of, whether it's plant powders or polyphenols or herbs or spices or vinegars alongside cooked animal foods.
Yeah. It's almost yeah, like from a physiological perspective or this mineral balance perspective, it does kind of make sense to kind of couple these animal foods with some plants, because of the
Mhm.
reasons that we talked already, like the acidity, the iron overloads, the carcinogens, all those things. So kind of complements each other quite nicely, I think.
Yeah.
All right, another question is, do you think that vitamin D at doses like 5,000 IU's could deplete copper?
Uh, it could potentially deplete copper from a competition with vitamin A, and vitamin A is needed to move copper around the body. So that's how I can see it potentially in reducing copper is through the reduction in your body's ability to transport it. Just like not getting enough copper can lead to iron deficiency because copper is needed to move iron around the body.
Yeah.
So vitamin D not only will compete with the absorption of vitamin A, but will typically increases your need for numerous vitamins and minerals because it activates so many genes that start producing proteins that require these nutrients to
Mm.
work. So then the minerals start going to these additional proteins that you've created, and now they were pulled from a different spot. So now it's sort of increased your need for those nutrients. So that's why I don't like just taking high doses of vitamin D unless I have vitamin K, magnesium, calcium, all these other nutrients optimized as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to know. Usually, the biggest thing that tends to deplete copper is zinc. So too much zinc from like a muscle meat or oysters or something. Unless you're eating liver with that or these organ meats next to that, then you may
Right.
promote this copper depletion.
Right. Yep.
Uh, Another question is, any idea why cream of tartar could cause heart palpitations on a carnivore diet?
Wonder if it's just like a food intolerance for that person.
Right.
I'm not sure if there's anything actually in there that would link to that.
I think usually people take the cream of tartar for like potassium, so maybe it has to do with something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, depends on why you're taking it as well. Like, do you need to take it, and do you feel better without it? So,
Right.
And I think there are also like healthier alternatives than cream of tartar, like the ones that I mentioned already. And
Right.
like the same with like, baking soda, like you could try to get sodium from baking soda, but it's a kind of harmful to you in general.
Yeah, too much baking soda all at once can inhibit the acid in the stomach and reduce that. Well, that this is another thing we didn't really touch on as well, is that if it's not just about how much nutrients you consume, it's about what you absorb, and your production of acid over time goes down. And on a low salt diet, you do produce less acid. So it's all about maintaining a good amount of acid in the stomach so you can digest the food and absorb the minerals and nutrients that are needed.
Yeah, definitely. So in that sense, sometimes I've having becoming too alkaline is also like not good because of the same reason. Like you lower the stomach acidity and like reduce the absorption of nutrients and things like that.
Yeah, taking too much bicarbonates, it doesn't really happen with waters, but as a supplement, it can be an issue, which is why if I am supplementing in addition to my bicarbonate water, I pick citrate. I pick sodium and potassium citrate because that won't affect the pH of the stomach. And I can dose myself with fairly large doses of citrate without messing up my stomach acid.
Hmm. Next question is what is your take on the calcium phosphate ratio for suppressing parathyroid hormone?
Mm. Yeah, well, you don't want to. Most people are getting too much calcium and phosphate because they're consuming foods that are fortified in both, which is a problem. So we get plenty typically phosphate on an animal-based diet. It's the calcium that's typically lacking. And so most people's calcium phosphate is like this, and they need to boost the calcium, and they can keep the phosphate the same. And at that same token, their magnesium is low as
Hmm.
well. So I think dropping the processed meats is going to really help because they will have inorganic phosphates as preservatives in there. And
Yeah,
so eating more fresh meat is going to help your calcium to phosphorus ratio just by switching over to healthy natural meat.
yeah, and I also think that you can increase the calcium from you know like things like sardine bones or even like the bone broth bones, all those tendons and ligaments. They have more calcium and less of the phosphate. So yeah, you get phosphate or phosphorus mostly from muscle meat again. So if you're eating, let's say, too much muscle meat, then that can be a problem. And likewise, magnesium, like the phosphorus reduces magnesium absorption as well. So kind of up your magnesium intake a little bit maybe as well.
Mhm.
Uh, do you support the food sensitivities testing, and is it worth it?
I've never personally tried it, so I can't really speak to it on like a real world basis. Um, if it worked for you, great. Because I think there's are like some people do have food intolerances, like no question about it. And obviously peanuts are a big one. But what's interesting is like you can develop these nut allergies over time. Like if you overconsume them, some of them, like particularly walnuts, you can develop like these food intolerances. So I think you just need to kind of like if you eat a food and you don't feel good, it's telling your body something, and maybe you should not keep eating it.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times, these tests may be inaccurate because of like you may also like register that you are allergic to a particular food because of eating it too often. Like if you eat a lot of eggs, then the test may tell you that you're allergic to eggs, but you feel fine and you don't have any symptoms. So, uh, that's kind of something to keep in mind, that these tests may not be accurate. And even if you do, the results tell you that you're allergic to something, but you don't have like any symptoms, then arguably you don't really need to remove it or something. You just have to kind of pay more attention and see how you respond.
Exactly.
um, if I take magnesium, do I need to eat it with fat for it to absorb?
That's this is so funny because I was honestly just about to cover this topic. Um, so fat can bind magnesium and reduce its absorption. And what's interesting is if you have high amounts of non-esterified fatty acids, which you can know that if you have high triglycerides, these free fatty acids are negatively charged and actually can bind magnesium and lead to depletion of magnesium in the blood serum. So they did a study, they did this fat loading study. They gave overweight young adults about 100 grams of fat through cream. They just consumed cream, and it dropped their serum magnesium to a deficient level because the fatty acids that increased in the blood 5-6 hours later, it bound all the magnesium and dropped the serum magnesium. And this happens after a heart attack too. You have this tremendous release of non-esterified free fatty acids after a heart attack, or any stressful situation can lead to an increase in these free fatty acids because noradrenaline will cause lipolysis and push out all these free fatty acids. So prolonged fasting, for example, can do this as well. 2 days of fasting, you have so much lipolysis and all these free fatty acids in the blood. It'll actually, the negatively charged free fatty acids will bind the magnesium and deplete it in the blood. So you do what the point is you have to be careful to not consume a lot of fat bombs, because that can potentially lead to elevations in free fatty acids and bind your serum magnesium.
Wow, that's super interesting, and I didn't know that. So too much fat basically is gonna reduce the absorption of the magnesium basically, and make you excrete it. So if you do take a magnesium supplement, then maybe like taking it while fasting, or in a fasted state, or with like a low fat meal would be better.
Yeah, I mean, the study was a pretty tremendous amount of fat, right? 100 grams of fat is a lot. So I don't want to say like, consuming 20 grams of fat would lead to the same thing. The goal is to not significantly boost the free fatty acid level in the blood. Now, whether that would happen, that same drop in magnesium in a non-obese person, like who's been on a ketogenic diet for weeks, maybe not. Maybe there isn't that large increase in free fatty acids and binding of magnesium, because this wasn't an overweight population with 100 grams of fat. So I think we do need more tests on, would a high fat ketogenic diet in someone who is doing it the right way, if they consume a large fat bomb, would that drop serum magnesium? I don't know.
Yeah, because if you are, let's say, metabolically healthy and you're burning fat as in ketosis, then your triglycerides tend to be low because you're burning them off for energy. Whereas if you're diabetic or insulin resistant, then your triglycerides stay high because your body isn't burning them for energy. So yeah, there may be some difference there. But in any case, like if you want to be safe, then just have it with like a lighter meal or like on an empty stomach.
Yeah, I mean, right. And then the key here is that if you have high triglycerides, that's a big indication that you're binding up a lot of your serum magnesium.
So it's a cause and effect, same root cause effect, or the vicious cycle.
Yep.
Well, that's really interesting. Next question is, can mineral imbalances and deficiencies impede the liver's function to get rid of toxins?
Absolutely. Every single function in the body is dependent on minerals in one form or another. So I know I always say this to you, but magnesium is required for the synthesis of protein, DNA, and ATP, and not a single function in the body will work without that, including detoxification, phase 1, phase 2 enzymes. So every system will suffer in one way or another, whether it be directly or indirectly through mineral deficiencies, because they run everything. They're like like if we're biological humans, right? If we're like these biological computers, humans, our tech runs on minerals, not only because they require the enzymes to function, but through indirect mechanisms of producing protein and producing ATP and actually activating ATP.
Yeah, that's very true. And all these antioxidant defense systems like glutathione, they need minerals. You need like sulfur and magnesium for that. So you do need basically, and maybe the biggest ones for detoxification tend to be the molybdenum, as well as like selenium, sulfur, those things that govern these antioxidant defenses as well.
Yep. True.
Do you drink your mineral water from plastic bottles? If not, how?
No, I use a glass bottle.
Yeah, it's a generally better option for sure.
Yep.
Is butcher box a source of good meat?
But I think I've had butcher box once. I believe they are grass-fed meats. Whether these animals are from a area that is low in contamination, whether their organs are low in contamination, no one really knows. Like I've had conversations with Paul Saladino, Carnivore MD, about how kidneys can become contaminated in cadmium, how liver can have an increase in dioxins. And so you do want to make sure you're sourcing from, a quality area, non-polluted area, because that's ultimately going to determine the health of the organs and the meat that you're consuming.
Yeah, that applies to everything, like
Right.
every other company as well.
Exactly. Yes.
Do you recommend digestive enzymes as we age to help absorb the nutrients from the food?
Yes and no. I think if you do have a problem with digesting foods and you can't seem to figure out why, maybe that approach, just throwing digestive enzymes at the problem, may lead to some benefit. It's always good to find the root cause, right? Are you depleted in salts and that's why you're not producing enough stomach acid? Do you have damage to the cells that secrete acid for some reason? You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
always try to figure out the root cause first. But because sometimes you never are going to be able to, maybe that approach is just the best for some people.
Yeah, like depends on your age as well. So there is like inevitable drop in your digestive capacity as you get older, and I would imagine that in your maybe 70s or 80s, you would like everyone yeah, people who have digestive problems, they may benefit from digestive enzymes or taking a stomach acid supplement, HCl. So yeah, like I don't think it like works as like this negative feedback loop that you start taking it and then your own body starts or stops producing those enzymes, if
Right.
I'm not mistaken, because you can always stop taking it, and if you're still healthy, then your body should kind of resume the production. But if you're still deficient and you're not producing then taking the supplement is still better than not producing those enzymes.
Yeah, that makes logical sense to me too.
Okay. Can stocks or bone broth help heal the gut and improve mineral absorption? Chicken or beef, which is best?
Okay, so improve mineral absorption. Can bone broths?
What about the
Well,
minerals? Like, do you get any minerals from the bone broth?
it completely depends on what is the source of your bone broth. So if it's bones, the only potential mineral that you may get in somewhat clinically significant amounts would be calcium, because it's difficult to pull minerals from bones. And that type of bone broth will also be very, very low in collagen. You don't really get a lot of collagen by trying to extract it from bones. You need to use collagenous meats to create true collagen bone broth. So that would be like drumsticks, right? Turkey necks. If you want to create, and you can see this, if you set your, let's say, bone broth in the refrigerator, you'll see there's just a tiny little skim of gelatin at the top.
Yeah.
You create a collagenous bone broth, 70% of it will be just gelatinous after the next day in the fridge. So you can test it. That's a good test to see if it contains a lot of collagen to heal the gut, to help maybe you absorb better minerals.
Yeah. If you have like a better gut and less of these malabsorption conditions, then yeah, you would absorb more of the minerals. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And like, would adding like vinegar help to break down the bones further and like break down the or like release the minerals more?
It does. It does. It takes a while. You typically want a bone broth going for 24 hours in vinegar, and that'll help get more calcium. But magnesium and the other minerals are going to be very, very low.
Right. We'll have another question about omega-3s. Can you counter all the problems of omega-6 by eating enough omega-3, or is too much omega-6 problematic regardless of how much omega-3 you get?
That's a loaded question. There is a balance that, more omega-3 will reduce, let's say, over producing, some harmful substances from omega-6. They do compete for the same enzymes. So yes, but then also at a certain point, no, especially if it's coming from seed oils. And, the primary goal, drop the seed oils, the refined seed oils, get omega-6 strictly from real food, and careful of nut butters, right? I mean, when I basically took out peanut butter from my diet, like my health was much better. Inflammation was less, fat loss was better because it's very easy to overconsume those nut butters. So I would just be careful of, even though that's considered like a whole food source, there are some sources that it's just you're giving you too much omega-6.
Yeah, yeah, like just avoid the high omega-6 foods, or like the most biggest ones, like the vegetable oils and seeds. And if you do get like small amounts of omega-6 from like nuts, or even like eggs, or like some meat have omega-6, then that's not really a huge concern, as long as you're eating some omega-3s as well, kind of balance it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the fat composition, the omega-6 fat composition of wild animals, it's much higher in omega-6 than even grass-fed, because real vegetation is high in omega-6. So we shouldn't just demonize omega-6 is the point.
Right.
And that fat also has more omega-3 to it. And I've started sort of thinking that maybe we don't need as much seafood for omega-3s, because wild meats and pastured meats have an omega-3 called DPA. They're actually pretty high in DPA, which 30% of that actually gets converted to DHA. So we used to think of pastured meat as a terrible source of omega-3s. But when you actually take into account the conversion of DPA to DHA, it's actually a pretty good source of DHA.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, does Mineral Fix have information regarding which type of mineral supplements are better absorbed than the other ones?
Yeah, we do cover how chelated minerals typically are better absorbed. There's two ways to absorb magnesium: paracellularly, which is between the cells, which requires ionic dissolved soluble magnesium, which is mineral waters. And then the other, transcellular, getting it across the cell, requires binding to an amino acid, like glycine, for example. And then once you get the magnesium into the body, ionized magnesium is great because it's already functional. With a chelated magnesium, you have to dissociate that from solution, in solution, to get it to an ionic form, for it to actually work. So I think combining both an ionic form of magnesium plus a chelated, if you're really deficient, is probably the best way to go, because you're hitting both ways of absorption.
Yeah, and the book does cover in all the chapters about usually like what is the best supplement form for this particular mineral, and yeah, like what are the other things that you need to keep in mind when you are supplementing, because yeah, like I said, taking a supplement can be problematic because of boosting the amount of one particular mineral and kind of leading to an imbalance and causing some other downstream issues. So yeah. All right, let's start picking the last question. Do you think consuming salmon raw will be worth it compared to a fish like sardines or anchovies?
So okay. Well, it depends what you're looking for. So salmon roe is going to have the astaxanthin, and it's going to have more of what's called a brain bioavailable DHA. So the particular form of DHA is bound to lysophosphatidylcholine in the salmon egg, which there's a direct transporter that can give it access to the brain. So it's, if you're looking for brain bioavailable DHA, then you can't replace salmon roe with, let's say, sardines. It's just not how it works.
Yeah.
So I guess it just depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, ideally, if you can have, then you can eat both. But the sardines have like the calcium that you get from the bones, and like anchovies could also have that. So yeah, maybe like head to head, the brain boosting benefits you get more from the salmon roe, but you do get like some DHA and omega-3s from the sardines as well, but you get the calcium as well. So maybe head to head, the sardines will be better. But if you were to directly optimize the brain function, then the salmon roe is better.
Yeah, and I mean, plus salmon roe is so expensive.
Right.
It's a conundrum. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, it was great talking with you, and thanks for coming to the live stream. Everyone can just check out the Mineral Fix from Amazon. And yeah, it's still, I think, one of the kind of best books about the minerals out there.
Yeah, I think I'm really happy with how the book turned out, and it's really there really isn't a book out there like it in regards to covering 22 minerals and how in depth we did. So I think that once people actually finish the book, it's a great resource to continue. You can keep going back to it and learning just these great golden nuggets of information.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, thanks for coming to the show, and yeah, let's see each other around.
All right, sounds good, Seam. Take care.
Right.